Sounds good.
Okay, we are live.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Good morning, colleagues. I hope you're well. Welcome to our Budget and Compensation Subcommittee. Today, Monday, May 2nd, 2022. We will call this meeting to order at 9:04 a.m. Before we launch into our agenda and all those good things, I'd like to take a moment to say Happy Teacher Appreciation Week to any classroom teachers who are part of this subcommittee, or any classroom teachers who may be listening to the conversation today. And also, I'd like to acknowledge our administrators. Yesterday was Principals Appreciation Day, so I want to make certain that we say Happy Principal Appreciation Day belated to our school administrators. We thank you all for the work that you do each and every day to ensure that our schools are moving forward and that we're engaging every learner in the classroom. So I wanted to take just a moment to give those remarks. Dr. Fleming, anything you'd like to share at this moment, sir?
Well, thank you, Dr. Graham. I echo your sentiments as well. We are starting Teacher Appreciation Week on the right foot this morning. We've already got folks going around, and we'll be doing that all week. And again, yesterday was National Principals Day as well, and so we wish them all well and thank them for their leadership and their vision as they guide the staff in their schools. But it is good to be with everybody. I'm actually in a school this morning calling in, and I will, just so everyone knows, need to step away. Hopefully no more than 5-10 minutes. About 9:30, the insurance commissioner will be here to give a student an award for saving a life about a month or so ago. So we're excited about that, but I will need to step away for a photo opportunity, and then I'll be back with you. But it's good to see everyone, and happy May. Thank you, Dr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming, and please send our congratulations to that student for saving a life. That's amazing. We will transition now to the agenda, and the agenda will be on the screen before you. Ask you to please take a look over our agenda and let me know if there are any items that we need to revise or edit. If there are any additions to the agenda. Hearing none, I will accept a motion to approve today's agenda.
So moved. This is Jeff Coltrane.
Thank you, Mr. Coltrane. Is there a second?
This is Catherine.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve today's agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. All opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. The agenda has been approved. Secondly, we'll need to turn our attention to the minutes from the March 29th, 2022 meeting. Dr. Evans forwarded those minutes to you in advance of today's conversation. I will need a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting.
So moved, Marcy.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Shonda Cherry.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the minutes from the March 29th, 2022 meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. Thank you. The motion carries. So we'll begin today's meeting just by reminding people of what our meeting norms are and making certain that we're all on the same page as we begin our conversation. Want to remind everyone that as we engage in today's work, we are led by the interests and needs of our students in the state of North Carolina and our educators in the state of North Carolina. So we ask that you please keep that point of reference in mind and use our students and our educators as your compass, if you will, for our conversations. Secondly, I also want to remind everyone that everyone's opinion is valued. So we should not diminish the opinion of any person on the call, nor should no one person dominate the conversation. We want to make certain that we're hearing from every person and that we're getting every perspective available to us as we engage in our discussion throughout the day. Let me pause there to see Dr. Fleming, if there's anything you'd like to add, sir.
I don't have anything to add. I think you covered that well.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll transition to guiding principles, and we just want to make certain that we keep these guiding principles in front of us. Keep in mind that as we engage in our conversation, we want to make certain that our ideas have impact on students. And again, that goes back to the previous norm, where we want to make certain that our compass is a focus on our students. And then we want to make certain that we're thinking about whether or not our discussion or our ideas are measurable in an authentic setting, i.e. in the presence of students and their learning. So just wanted to keep those principles and those norms in front of us as we proceed throughout our discussion today. So at this point in time, let's talk about the timeline for our work. And I am going to yield the floor to Dr. Evans, who will engage us in a discussion about the timeline for the work that this subcommittee must comply.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. I'm just going to go over an estimated timeline that I also reviewed with for the joint co-chair meeting. And this was guided by Chairman Patrick Miller. Just to let you know, so that we're all on the same page, there are 3 remaining meetings. Well, one of the meetings is happening right now for May, June, and July for each of the subcommittees. And then from there, this would be all the work of the subcommittees would then be consolidated and put together for a final draft that would then go to Pepsi for discussion in August. And depending on the discussion, remember this is an estimated timeline, that ideally this would go to Pepsi for approval in September. And from there go to the state board in October for presentation and discussion, and then for approval either November or December, depending on those discussions between board members. And then I just wanted to go through a few reminders. So just to remind the subcommittee members that the goal of these meetings, these 3 remaining meetings, is to make changes as determined by you jointly as a subcommittee for the draft model. So we want you to really keep that in mind to make these decisions and these changes, because there's only 3 months left in order to do that. And then from there, make sure that you really focus, and you will be guided by Dr. Fleming and Dr. Graham in this respect, on your priority buckets. And I'm just going to remind you that the priority buckets are focusing around your specific duties and responsibilities. The chart that will be presented a little bit later, just as a reminder for what those priorities are within the subcommittee. And then if there is feedback outside of those priorities, then that is something that I can share with other subcommittees, the appropriate subcommittee, and then they can receive that feedback and consider it accordingly. I also wanted to bring to the attention of the subcommittee members that quorum is not needed to finalize any changes for the subcommittee. That will be needed for the full commission, but not for any subcommittee decisions, and that the draft will be sent to, this final draft will be sent to Pepsi for consideration, discussion, and approval. So I just wanted to provide those reminders as we move into the next step of work. Dr. Graham.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Are there any questions from committee members about the timeline or those reminders that Dr. Evans shared with us?
Dr. Graham, this is Tom Tomberlin. There is a question in the chat.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there a link to the current draft model? Do we have a link to the current draft model of the proposal in its current iteration, colleagues?
So that was linked to the March agenda. And so that's something that I can make sure to send out to the entire subcommittee after this meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Evans.
Sure.
So committee members, you will receive the most recent version of that draft model. So please be on the lookout via email. Any other questions or comments? On the screen before you, you see those priority buckets that Dr. Evans preferred. So just as a reminder, we've focused on these in the past, but again, just wanted to bring these back to your attention. Our 4 goals, if you are, one is to determine the minimum salary scenarios for each license level. We've done that. Of course, we need to continue to have conversation in that space. Determine an amount for the professional advancement accounts. We've done that as well, but we'll need to revisit it to make certain that we feel good about what we have there. Determine the whole harmless provisions, and then determine cost of proposal with phase-in strategies for the Office of State Budget Management. So those are our 4 priority buckets, and this is what we're responsible for achieving before we get to the discussion in the fall in August with Pepsi. So just want to keep in mind what our goals are, if you will. Questions about any of those pieces? All right, hearing none, then we'll transition, and I'll ask Dr. Fleming to come to the floor, if he would, please, and talk with us a little bit about National Board Certification and Master's Pay.
Well, in a discussion I had with Dr. Tomberlin last week, we did have a little discussion on how we move forward with this. And I think it's important that we remember that anything dealing with national board pay and master's pay has typically, and probably will in the future, have to do a lot with legislative action. And I think as a committee, we can really make 2 decisions here. Assume that it would stay in place or change based on legislative action. So as an example, master's pay, while there are folks grandfathered in for the additional 10%, the General Assembly obviously has taken that away for anyone new. We can make an assumption that it would stay the same just like that, or we would have to find a way within our model to incorporate that. So if we want master's pay to return, we would have to integrate that into our model somehow. And so I believe, I don't know, Dr. Tomberlin, if you want to add anything to that, at the end of the day, it's a legislative decision, and not necessarily something we have messed too much with because of that.
Yes, this is Tom Tomberlin. Dr. Graham, I think DPI recognized that we took that approach to the master's pay and the national board certification. This is not kind of these are provisions provided by the legislature, and so we did not discuss them at all in the proposed model. But I think anybody who's been kind of listening to the media feedback on this, it has been largely interpreted as we're proposing not to include those things. And so, you know, I mean, I don't know what the right course is as far as the committee, the subcommittee recommending the inclusion of that or not, but at least a statement that the absence of this recognizes the legislature's authority in this matter and is not, and the subcommittee has no recommendation on that. Something to that effect to alert the field that we're not actively trying to remove this, that we're just not taking a position.
And I thank Dr. Tomlin for mentioning that, because I think that's an important point. From some of the feedback you hear from maybe all the subcommittees work, but you certainly hear it from ours too, is because we didn't mention something means we don't want it there, and that's not the case. As Tom said, we really didn't dig into it because General Assembly does have control over that, but just because we didn't mention it doesn't mean we want it gone. I don't think there's anyone that I know of on this call anyway that would want it not considered. But I do appreciate Dr. Tomlin clearing that up.
Dr. Fleming and Dr. Graham, this is Jeff Coltrane. Is there anything preventing the subcommittee from recommending that master's pay and national board certification pay remain? Like, even though it's not a part of this model, the committee recommends that those things stay as they are currently. That might clear up any confusion about where the subcommittee stands. You know, while it's not part of the model, I think if the subcommittee or Pepsi recommends that those stay, I don't know that I see an issue with us stating that, but I wanted to raise that to our leaders.
And I believe Dr. Martin just mentioned that similar comment on the chat as well. You know, I don't, certainly mentioning it may help move it forward. Dr. Tomlin, do you have a position on that either way?
I don't have a position. No, I mean, I think that's the will of this subcommittee.
Or it should be, or a thought, I guess I should say, not position.
No, I mean, I think that's a really wise way to navigate this. Is we recognize it's under the authority of the General Assembly. We don't push the legislature into a decision that they may or may not want to make. But we recognize the thing that currently exists continues to exist under this model. I think affords that opportunity. I mean, in the end, it's you know, the General Assembly is going to have to look at the numbers and decide what makes sense. I think our position that we're not advocating for its removal is about the best we could do here.
This is Catherine. May I speak?
Yes.
Thank you. So I just want to provide everyone a little context here about this issue, and then I would like to share a recommendation. So the legislature took away master's pay for two reasons. They took it away because they felt that there were too many teachers getting an MSA, which really, you know, you can't really make an argument that getting a master's in school administration or in school leadership improves outcomes for students. And so teachers were getting that MSA and then not going into administration and then collecting master's pay. The other side of this is that they were looking at research, at some research, and I for one, I'm just going to say I don't agree with this research, but some research that said that data show that teachers who have a master's in education as opposed to a master's in the field that they're teaching, for example, math or history, that there was also no increased positive outcome for students. And that is where that's where the bulk of the argument, I think, continues with the legislature, is that they still maintain that a person who gets a master's in education is that there's no correlation between student outcomes and that master in education or a Master of Arts in teaching. I believe that from conversations I've had with legislative leadership, that they are ready to consider reinstating master's pay for people who have a master's degree in the subject matter they teach, like math or social studies or science. And while that, for me, is not, me personally, is not enough, I think that all teachers with master's degrees should have master's pay. It's certainly a step in the right direction. And we need to continue to find the research that shows that there is a positive correlation between any master's degree in education and student outcomes. Now, I think that we need to have a model that gives the legislature the option of reinstating master's pay. So I think we need to have two models: one that includes it, and one that doesn't. And when I say in the models, I'm talking about in the compensation piece. On the one hand, we're saying that this model is compensating teachers for the extra work that they do, for the results that they get, et cetera. And so one could argue that that kind of takes care of master's pay. But on the other hand, other professions pay more for advanced degrees, and education should not be any different. So I think that we need to be prepared for the fact that the legislature might be willing to give in to some extent on this, and that the model should reflect that.
Thank you, Superintendent Truitt.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say this too, you know, as I think through it, as we talk about that being a legislative decision, I think everything that we're proposing is a legislative decision too. So, you know, in listening to what Superintendent Truitt has just said, you know, it may be good at minimum for us at least to make the statement, just as Martin in here said, you know, at least show that we do support it. And again, I do agree that probably some of the criticism we've heard is just because we haven't mentioned something. And so if this helps with that, but also could help with reinstating master's pay, that would be good. Now, that doesn't do anything on national board certification, but, you know, if we are making some form of statement, both of those could probably fit within that to, one, reinstate master's pay, but also the national board pay also continues. And I do think we have to make a decision: does it continue as is, or does it continue somehow different than what it looks like today?
Superintendent Truitt, can I ask a clarification question? And thank you for your comments again. You talked about perhaps considering a recommendation to include the reinstatement of master's pay if an individual has a master's within the discipline area. Would you be amenable in your recommendation to also include someone who might have a master's in a discipline area that's also education focused? So, for example, rather than just having a math master's degree or a history master's degree, perhaps the individual has a math education or a history education master's degree.
Yeah, so that, my personal feeling, and in all fairness, I have an MED, and so I think it absolutely made me a better teacher. So yes, I think that we've seen, in particular with those who, special ed teachers who have a master's in special ed, as well as those with an MAT and an MED, I think that we absolutely need to include them. I'm just saying that I don't know that the legislature is going to be ready to do that.
Sure.
If we have some solid research that shows that there is a value add for student outcomes with those degrees, I think we should absolutely go whole hog with this in the recommendation.
Great.
Good morning. This is Stephen Martin, and I just wanted to chime in. I've put some things in the chat. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Superintendent Truitt and the others on the call for supporting master's pay and perhaps national board certification pay. I think those are two important elements, and I realize it may come with some qualifications. Second, I would love to see the research behind this. I've heard it mentioned many times about the research, and I did a quick Google search just a few moments ago, and I see research on both sides of it. I see research that says teachers with master's pay are highly effective, and I see research that says the opposite. So I think it's important to look at both sides and to make informed decisions, but I do support compensating teachers for master's pay and national board's pay. And I think if we can include it in the ultimate model, then there would be a clear path to, as educators, we ought to certainly value advanced education, and that can be a part of advanced teaching roles. If we think of a way to include that in the model, I think it could go hand in hand and actually benefit the model and benefit the future teachers and the current teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Dr. Holland, you've been waiting patiently. I see your hand raised.
Thank you. My comments very similarly to Superintendent Truitt's and to Stephen's. And I find it interesting that some of the research around teachers who obtained an MSA not being as effective in the classroom, and I can see that again to one degree, but I think that as we look at advanced teacher roles and teacher leadership, an MSA very much aligns to that. I would argue, based on the things that they're taught in their programs with our EPP partners, having seen that and having been part of that in teaching in an MSA program, I know very strongly that the HR and law classes are very helpful for those that are in the MSA when it comes to working with human capital and with people. So I agree with most here and would like to back up Dr. Superintendent Truitt's recommendation that we include in our recommendation the restoration of master's pay and the maintaining of national board pay. Because if we remain silent on it, my fear is that the legislature who are not necessarily participating and listening to all of these conversations would assume that no voice on that means it's one that we wouldn't support. And I don't feel that way at all. Most legislators and their staff have never been educators. They've never been in public school systems formally as employees. And so I think that we need to be that voice for those people out there. And we need to very clearly state that we are in support of that. So that is what I think part of our job here as a subcommittee is to build those recommendations. So I would recommend that we include that very clearly and transparently and explicitly. Use all those buzzwords as part of our recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Holland. Other thoughts?
I agree with that too, and I put that in the chat. It's Bill Griffin from Caldwell County. I think as a subcommittee, that certainly needs to be part of what we recommend. And of course, we're not legislature, don't make those decisions, but I think as a subcommittee, it would behoove us to make sure that we recommend that for our teachers. If this becomes part of the advanced teacher roles as a promotion, I've never really been told or been able to articulate that to staff members. How many advanced teacher roles would we be allowed per school if we're looking at that and saying that if this is part of what you're able to promote yourself as, how many advanced roles would we be allowed, or I guess funded per school?
And I believe that's going to be a part of a future conversation either today or in future meetings. Am I correct saying that, Dr. Evans and Dr. Tomlin? Some of that may be today because I know we do have Alexis Schaus with us. But
Well, this is Catherine again. I apologize for my ignorance, but I have been working under the assumption that this model, when adopted, will subsume advanced teaching roles. The advanced teaching, in other words, advanced teaching roles becomes integrated into this plan, and we don't use the term ATR anymore. Is that not how others are seeing this?
I think this is Brenda, may I speak?
Yes, please.
I think you would probably end up using it because they would be advanced teaching roles within this, but it wouldn't be a program. It would be part of this broader plan. And to answer the question that we just had about percentages, currently what we're seeing in advanced teaching roles districts is somewhere around 20% of teachers could be in these advanced roles, most of them being in those teacher leadership roles, but a small percentage having that sort of extended reach, having more kids and being paid to take on more kids. But that should be at the discretion. What we found from our research, again, 9% of the schools in the state are using this model. And what we found is that it's best used when you know your talent within your building and how they are best applied. So because this is not a one-size-fits-all model, if you have more teachers that lean toward teacher leadership and whatnot, that would be at the discretion of the principal to determine within the school building. But we're talking about 20% or so, which is obviously a significant amount and something that anybody could really aspire to be. It's not like there's just one opportunity within the school building to be a principal. Plus, when you have 20% across every single school building in the state, you have an opportunity for mobility that if you want to take on a role and it's not in your building, you'd be able to move to another building. So that's what we're finding within again, about 9% of the schools in our state are doing this now. And
that's was kind of my take. The way Brenda has explained that is we're now advanced teaching roles, as she mentioned, is kind of an add-on program that a school district can do, that this would be completely integrated into the entire pay or compensation model where it's more separate today.
So I think that the nomenclature matters, and that in my mind, and I want y'all to tell me if I'm wrong, I would then assume that we when the model goes into effect, we would be using terms like, teachers might say, I'm a license 4, or I'm an advanced teacher, or I'm an advanced teacher classroom leadership, or I'm an advanced teacher adult leadership. And that we will cease using the phrase advanced teaching roles, which is a separate program that has separate funding from the legislature.
That sounds exactly right to me, where today I can say, well, we have an advanced teaching role program. When we get into this model, right, I'm a level 4 advanced. I think that makes perfect sense to me. So I hope I'm not wrong on that either.
If I could add on that, yes, I think that just thinking of how the legislative language would be written, they have advanced teaching roles language that. And it clearly states that sort of schools and districts need to be approved as advanced roles to make sure that it's sitting within those guardrails. What we found is making it what you would call purely merit pay, or making it you take a class and you get paid more money, doesn't work, and it doesn't improve student achievement. And so the legislature put in really clear parameters of what it means to be an advanced roles district or an advanced roles school. So my guess is that they would still keep that language, just like you keep the same language to describe what a board certified teacher is, or a TA or anything else that gets described. I would also just and we've recommended this from the beginning, this is a massive cultural shift. Moving from having one principal with 50 direct reports, moving from a situation where the beginning teacher, gets the hardest classroom in the building and isn't getting supported by an experienced teacher. This is a big shift and really requires that districts and schools are opting into the model and that we're taking our time. It's not going to happen overnight. And so again, I think there's going to be need, at least for the advanced roles program language, to happen until it becomes truly statewide. And we would not recommend that it's sort of overnight every single school in the state is doing this. We've seen this in other places, and if it's not adopted and designed within the school building and designed within the community, that it will fall apart, because it will be that people are just sort of, following the mandated rules, as opposed to actually thinking about, I have this number of teachers with these capacities, and how do I arrange them to best meet the needs of these students, which is a more effective model. So again, I would say, yes, long term, the advanced teaching roles program would go away as every single district in the state, every single school has adopted it. But that is, I just want to be really clear, a very long-term play. It's got to be at least, 10 years, 5 years for sort of every district to opt in. If every single district wanted to start opting in next year, great. I just don't see that happening overnight.
Any other commentary or input? I want to note something that Jeff Coltrane put in the chat area. The governor's 21-23 budget proposal included reinstating master's pay. The estimated cost was $7 million per year. So I wanted to make certain that you saw that chat. Any other comments?
This is Brian. If I could jump in here, the advantage of tying these things, masters, national board, et cetera, into the advanced roles is that the advanced roles are designed to be a carefully constructed role in the school that advances student learning. So if you have one of those advanced licensure tiers, you have a job in the school where you're reaching a lot more students, and that's whether that's by leading other teachers or whether that's by reaching more directly, you're having a bigger impact on kids by virtue of having that role. I think one of the critiques of master's pay and national board pay, as it's been done in the past here, is that there's no connection like that. You can be a national board teacher and still teach 21 third graders every year for the rest of your career. You can have a master's degree and still have that normal teacher impact. What we're talking about here is creating advanced roles where you have bigger impact, and therefore it's worth it for the state to invest in that additional compensation. And so if we say master's degree, national board, these are contributors to your ability to get an advanced role, that makes sense. But then it's the advanced role that the state is paying for. That'd be my case for how these fit into what we're talking about in this model.
Thank you. Any other commentary? So as chairs of this subcommittee, Dr. Fleming and I, our job is to make certain that we execute the will of the committee. So what I'd like to do, well, before I do that, Dr. Holland, I see your hand raised again. I want to circle back to you.
Yeah, and this may not be the appropriate time. I just want to put a pin in something that has come to light as part of the discussions. And Alexis may need to speak to this as well, because it will be a legislative decision on how it's handled. And we have not discussed at all in any of our conversations right now, cultural exchange or international faculty and how that works, because that will be impacted by this as well. So I just want us to not lose sight of that. So again, just putting a pin in it before it leaves my mind again. There's a lot of great conversation, and I don't want to lose that thought one more time. I've lost it twice this morning already, so I apologize.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, Dr. Holland. Any other comments or thoughts? So what I want to do is make certain as a subcommittee that we do some things in decency and order here. And I want to make certain that we are moving forward as is the will of the committee. So what I'll do, I want to handle these two items separately, but I will need from you all a formal recommendation, a formal motion for us to, as a subcommittee, recommend National Board Certification Element 1, Master's Pay Element 2. But in order to do that, I need a formal motion to make certain that when we get to that point of creating our proposal, this group, this body has agreed upon it as our direction. So understanding that it's legislative decision, I get it, but I want to make certain that we as a committee are in agreement that we're heading in that direction. So let me handle National Board Certification first. So I would ask for a formal motion for us as a subcommittee to include a recommendation that we maintain National Board Certification compensation as a part of our model.
Yeah, Anthony, this is Stephen Martin. I'll make that recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Monica Lambert, second.
It's been approved and properly seconded that we include National Board Certification compensation as a part of our model. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Dr. Graham, this is Bill Griffin. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
I was trying to chime in. Are we recommending that National Board Certification be for all those that obtain national boards, or just those that are being utilized in an advanced teacher role?
As I understand it, we're connecting this conversation to the advanced teaching role. That's what I've heard is the primary driver of conversation.
So we're stating that those that currently have national boards that are not being utilized in those 20% in a advanced teacher roles would not receive that compensation any longer. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
I'm sorry, Dr. Griffin, I'm confusing points here. Master's pay is what I was thinking relative to the advanced teaching role. National Board Certification, as I understood, would be for everyone, but maybe I'm misinterpreting the discussion.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I think we need to return for a second to Brian Hassel's comment to provide clarification. So are we saying that we could present a model that provides master's pay for all, regardless of where they are in the license, in the pathway? Or are we saying that it's part of that there's additional pay for having a master's degree if you are beyond license 4?
I think those need to be ironed out for me to agree as we move forward.
Well, and my understanding was this is one of those items that would be, this is Aaron, by the way, this would be one of those that's kind of like it is today, where national board and master's pay would apply for all teachers, regardless of where they're at level 4 or above, or wherever they may be on the model.
I can agree with that.
The compensation increase, I think, comes outside of that and just comes from the fact that you are moving up the scale, if I'm not correct. So a level 4 advance, as you know, we have made that salary suggestion. Then you would, just like you would every level, you would then add on these extra items.
So I'm seeing in the chat people who are saying, I agree, all teachers.
That sounds to be yeah.
I can be persuaded either way. Excuse me, this is Catherine. I can be persuaded either way, but I will say that it is the idea of giving a blanket additional pay of 12% or whatever it is to someone purely because they have a master's degree is in conflict with what this model is trying to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think you have the guardrails in there as well of having it to be in area, having it to be within the area of what you're teaching.
If you could add those guardrails as qualifiers, But if this model is to, master's degrees and years of experience have been used in the past as proxies for being an effective educator. If we don't need to use those proxies anymore, if you have somebody who's taking like a fly-by-night master's degree, it's not even just the degree content, but it's also the degree quality. I mean, we've all known that there are master's programs that are better than other master programs. So using it as a qualifier for advanced role, or as something to be considered as evidence, which is what the other industries do. Other industries don't pay you automatically more for everybody just to have a master's degree. It's a qualifier for advanced roles.
I'm guessing, and I don't want to step outside my role here, but as I kind of see some of the comments that have been put up, they're probably thinking down the same road that I am of teacher shortages and what do we need to do to boost pay. Now, the good thing is, because of the salary, we have all made suggestions for each of the levels. We have increased salary. Before master's pay or national board, we've increased salaries. Now, more is always better, certainly in the recruiting side of what Marcy's doing and other HR directors and principals, for that matter, superintendents. But I do think it's worthy of a discussion. I completely understand where Brenda's headed on this, and say superintendent as well, where we no longer are going to use national boards or masters to determine effectiveness. I could probably go either way on this, but I think because of all we've lived through and the fact that we're struggling to find teachers and all staff for that matter, anything sounds good right now. So I just felt like I needed to say probably why a lot of the K-12 folks are thinking the way I am.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't want us to take that off of what we need to do either. I mean,
This is Bill Griffin from Caldwell County. In efforts to recruit and retain teachers in our profession currently, if there is any conversation of these being removed as we move forward with a model to where the only way that you get national boards or master's pay is through the advanced teacher role, I think it will really harm our profession right now.
So colleagues, we had on the floor a motion.
I'm sorry, I'd love to understand what you just said about harming our profession. We don't have master's pay now. We're suggesting to add masters as an opportunity for advanced roles, which is a step above where we've been.
So we have a lot of people that are currently grandfathered in master's pay.
Yes.
And those are some of those individuals are distinguished teachers.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. We also honor national board certified teachers currently, and listening to the feedback that are coming from our teachers. If we were to recommend as a subcommittee something that may take that away and moving forward, I think it would be extremely detrimental to those current educators that we employ.
Bill, thank you for clarifying that. I completely agree. And what the language I would propose is to be explicitly clear that that board certified pay as it sits today would stay, and this is to the language, Dr. Graham, you were talking about, that they'd stay, both of them. If you're grandfathered for master's pay, or if you have board certified, and not grandfathering board certified, I want to be really clear. Pay that component stays as it is, and in addition to that, just like board certified is a qualifier for advanced roles, masters could be a qualifier for advanced roles. That could be, it's really easily slipped into the language right next to board certified. So you have an assurance to everybody that you're still going to get your 12% or you're going to get your 10% or both. And if you earn board certified, you're going to get it too, right? It should be really clear that status quo on those things. And as an addition, adding masters as an opportunity for advanced roles. That might be language to make it clearer to everybody.
And the grandfathering of the masters continues. I don't think
Right.
anyone's proposing to do away with the grandfathering. It's about future obtaining of master's degrees. That would be tied to the advanced roles.
So colleagues, the motion that's on the floor gets at the National Board Certification grandfathering. And it
I wouldn't do grandfather board certified. I think it should just stay as it is.
Yes, correct. So that's the motion that's on the floor. That was moved and properly seconded. We've had discussion around it. At this point, unless there's a need for further discussion, I'd like to go ahead and execute this motion.
Dr. Graham,
Yes.
this is Tom Tomberlin. I just want to make sure I'm clear for us and staff. So basically, you're voting on whether to keep the existing rules related to both master's degree and national board certification as they are written in statute.
In this particular motion, it's just focused on national board. We're going to circle back to masters, but yes, it would be, we explicitly recommend as a subcommittee that we keep as in statute that recommendation for national board certification compensation. All
right. One other just clarifying piece for something I think you may be headed towards. Using master's degree and or national board certification as evidence for holding the advanced roles, that would technically be a vote on this committee to send that recommendation to licensure. That would not be under the purview of this subcommittee.
Got it. Okay. All right. So any other further conversation around the national board certification piece where we are explicitly recommending that we maintain that compensation? Okay. Hearing no further conversation, then all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. All right, that motion carries. So as a subcommittee, we will explicitly recommend that we maintain national board certification compensation as a part of our model. So let's circle to master's pay. And Dr. Tomlin, I'm going to ask you to come back for one quick second. You clarify your statement, what you just shared again. I want to make certain I'm clear.
So the issue of whether to keep the master's and or the national board certification in the compensation model is certainly under the direction of this subcommittee. I think the question was raised whether we make the recommendation that a master's and or national board certification serve as one of the indicators or one of the evidences for holding an advanced position. I'm just trying to clarify that decision would not be under the purview of this subcommittee, but would
I agree.
Gotcha. All right.
I was thinking the same.
So all we can do, colleagues, is make certain that we, again, as a matter of record, explicitly recommend that master's pay and national board certification are parts of this model, so that, there's no silence from this subcommittee on those topics. But I want to make certain I'm clear there. So thank you, Dr. Tomlin. So let's address the master's pay component then. We've already done national board certification. So I want to make certain that I'm clear on what the will of the group is. We are saying that within this model, we are recommending that master's pay, that we account for master's pay within the discipline area or a discipline pedagogical area moving forward. That's what I think I've heard. Is that correct?
Dr. Graham, this is Jeff Coltrane. I think, and maybe this is what you're saying, but it sounds like we're saying the status quo, like maintaining the status quo. So teachers who currently receive a 10% supplement for master's pay would continue to receive the 10% supplement for master's pay moving forward. And then it sounds like there's a policy proposal that would go to the other committee of incorporating masters into advanced teaching roles, or the advanced degree.
Exactly. So Jeff, if you could take that and make it a motion, I would appreciate it.
I move that this subcommittee include in its recommendations that teachers who currently receive a master's pay supplement continue to receive a master's pay supplement under this model.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second, Monica Lambert.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. Although, are we ready for the vote or any discussion?
Jeff, did you want to add the second part about we propose to recommend masters as a factor for ATR?
Let's hold that one.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, let's move on this one, the status quo, and then we'll circle back to the ATR. Any further discussion on this particular motion?
So this is Stephen again. Just to make sure I understand the motion, it's basically a hold harmless motion for those teachers receiving master's pay now. They would continue to receive it under the new model. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I may be voting against that. I know that maybe this is not in the purview of our committee, but I'm interested certainly in continuing that, but also in a recommendation that master's pay be available for all teachers, even those not currently receiving it.
I don't think this vote precludes that decision. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
And I think some of that policy is out of our scope. That would be another subcommittee. But again, please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct, as I understand it.
But as we're looking to vote currently with the proposal, it's ultimately a hold harmless for those individuals currently holding that master's that were grandfathered in. And then later discussion would be, I guess, a different motion to include potentially bringing back masters for those in field.
That's correct. So this particular motion is pretty much the grandfathering. It's the status quo, if you will. And this is in response to people saying that this subcommittee has not said explicitly where we stand on that issue. So it's us simply stating explicitly that master's compensation would remain in this model for those individuals who have been compensated accordingly.
Thank you for the clarification.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Any other conversation? All right, we'll execute the motion then. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. All right, so that motion carries. So as a matter of clarity, National Board Certification, master's pay, this subcommittee will state explicitly that those items will remain on the table moving forward. Now we get into the conversation and perhaps a motion, depending on where this subcommittee is, on master's pay moving forward, being a part of the advanced teaching role, or as I've heard others say, perhaps master's pay serving as the compensation metric period, whether it's part of that ATR or not. So what I like to do is kind of debate this a little bit more so I can figure out where we're going as a subcommittee. So what I think I heard is an argument for master's pay compensation for those individuals, or with it being a qualifier connected to the advanced teaching role. That's what I thought I heard. Let me know if I'm wrong or incorrect.
Yes, I would make that motion.
Can somebody paraphrase what that means for me, please? What does that mean? It means that it's going to be part of license 4 and above. It'll be a piece of evidence or a consideration for license 4 or above.
Currently, the language that we have for ATR, for advanced roles, state statute requires ATR districts use some objective criteria to determine eligibility, ... and so on and so forth. And National Board Certified is one of those options, and master's degree language could be added to that statute, but that would be for advanced roles. Now, if you want master's degrees to be considered as a factor for license 4, although I thought the whole idea of this model was that license 4 was going to be based on effectiveness, not inputs, which a master's degree would be arguably an input. That would be a separate thing.
Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you for that clarification. As I stand with the advanced teacher roles and those inputs that we're looking for, there's just several questions that I've heard from teachers that I'm unable to define for them. You know, if we're limiting part of the proposal that was pushed that we were to show teachers and gather information was giving them the ability to advance in their career, but yet, you know, how many of those can truly advance with what we're promoting? If we're promoting that they could, at level 4 with the master's in their field, certainly does give them some promotion. So I'm just unclear on really and truly, when it comes down to it, how many teachers are going to have the liberty to advance into an advanced teacher role past that of level 4.
I can maybe answer that question. Currently, about 20% of teachers have a master's degree or did before the grandfathering started, and about 20% would have advanced roles. Now, you can presume that some people without a master's degree would qualify for advanced roles, but you could also presume that if you're motivated and getting a master's degree, that you're interested in taking on either more students, having a greater impact on your school, and so would therefore be heavily weighted towards. So the answer to your question is literally could be every single person who gets a master's degree could get in advanced roles, but perhaps maybe not all of them will. But it isn't a matter of you get a master's degree and only have a 5% chance of being able to get that benefit. And it is a big step up from what we have now in terms of it's being grandfathered out. So I think it's a good, it's a good compromise, and it's consistent with what I think the intent was, which is if you have a master's degree and it is making you a better teacher and it is having a greater impact on students and the people around you, you should get rewarded for it. And this gives a pathway for that to actually happen.
And I would add that in our current proposal, all teachers at level 4, except for perhaps those that have 26 plus years of experience, would be making more or as much as or more than the master's degree schedule currently pays teachers with master's degrees. So we're raising everyone has the opportunity to earn as much as master's degree holders currently earn. And so then you can go above that with advanced roles. So for teachers and for the teacher shortage and recruitment, this is just a much, much better deal for teachers than anything we've ever offered before, including back when everyone had a master's degree option.
Yeah, and I will say this, everybody, I do think in listening to Brian and Brenda, I do believe ultimately this is better than it's ever been. Now, I will also say this, again, on the LEA side here, there's a marketing piece to this too, I think, or maybe not a marketing piece, but a communication piece that I think Marcy has brought up, Bill's brought up, that how do we communicate that this is better? Maybe that's, I don't know, more I think about it, maybe that's really what our challenge is, more so than just making a statement so people know that it's not missing. How do we communicate this in a way so people know that this truly is better? Because when you look at the compensation levels, when you look at the advancement opportunities for teachers, meaning they don't have to become a school administrator to increase their compensation, I think the more I think about it, well, how do I communicate that? And does that make sense, Brenda or Brian? I'm where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I think that everybody's been clear that we need better communication tools and FAQs and in districts that are doing advanced roles, everything you just described is being used, right, to communicate. You have this opportunity to move up without moving out. And that's part of kind of becoming an advanced roles district, becoming advanced roles schools. And that's why it's not something that can be just, rip the Band-Aid off and done overnight.
That's right.
Either.
That's right.
Yeah.
But to Brian's point, I think as a plan or whatever is getting passed on to the state board, to be explicitly clear that level 4 is greater than most other with master's pay. Being clear about that in the narrative and in the language and the presentation is going to be really important as well. I'll add that a lot of states have in the past require. I'm actually in the process of doing the research. Require a master's degree. So when we look at, we're and it's a burden because 100% of their teachers have to pay up to $100,000 to get a master's degree. And so we don't burden our teachers with that responsibility of requiring a master's degree. So it's just something to keep in mind that it's unusual, I think, that and we're still doing the research, but I think it's more common that it's just required to become a teacher in some states and versus getting quote unquote master's pay. So something to think about.
Shauna Cherry asked, if I'm a level 4 teacher, how do I increase my compensation if I have no interest in leading adults? And I believe you would still have your legislative increases, your cost of living increases, and all that.
Well, and there's also an advanced role that's not about leading adults.
That's right.
Expanding your reach as well. Yeah.
Well, and Dr. Fleming, also the draft model includes every 5-year renewal cycle.
Right.
If you renew that level 4 license, there's a $5,000 salary increase.
Yes.
So, potentially, if a teacher qualifies for license 4 in their first 5 years, then they would be making, $25,000 more by the time they retire than they were when they started. So, and that is not including any legislative increases.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, that's right.
So if I can chime in again, this is Stephen. I think the hard part for us all to wrap our heads around, especially those that have been doing this a while, and I've said this before, it's hard to envision this new model when many of us have lived with the previous model for 30 plus years. So, trying to merge the best of both and make a model that's going to be excellent for all is difficult. So I'll be the first to say that. But trying to do that, and if I felt confident moving forward that any teacher who obtained a master's would be able to receive additional compensation, whether that's at level 4, level 3, wherever, I would feel better. And now I realize that I've heard that there's research that shows that a master's does not necessarily correlate to value add or effective teaching by whatever measure that is, be it EVOS or some other measure. I will say though, from my experience, I'm trying to think back many, many years, I cannot think of a teacher who obtained a master's degree that was not ultimately a better teacher after obtaining it. Whether or not they were classified as effective based on our measures is one thing, but whether or not they were a better teacher for their students is another. And so I would just say that's the hard part that I'm wrestling with is I would love a compensation model that honors both in some way, that when a teacher obtains an advanced degree, be it a master's, an EDS, an EDD, whatever type degree, that there is added compensation, because I do believe it makes them a better teacher to have that advanced degree.
This is Jeff Coltrane, Dr. Fleming, and Dr. Graham. I'm hearing sort of two issues that I think are being discussed. The first is what Brenda brought up about a recommendation from this subcommittee to I guess it's the Licensure Advancement Subcommittee on including a master's degree as one criteria for qualifying for one of those license for advanced certifications. And then the other is this committee recommending reinstating master's pay for all teachers moving forward that receive a master's degree. You know, I think maybe those are two different issues that need to be considered. You know, the policy recommendation to me personally makes sense. And I do not disagree with reinstating master's pay, and I know the governor has been fully supportive of that as well, but I'm not sure that it's in the purview of the subcommittee to consider that because it's something that is outside of this model, but that's my personal opinion. You know, I feel like the subcommittee saying that those things that the current rules or policy shouldn't change makes sense, but I'm not sure that this subcommittee can recommend reinstating master's pay because it doesn't quite fit within this model, if you will, of what we're recommending. Not that we would be opposed to it, but obviously I'm not sure that that fits within our purview.
Thank you, Jeff. And Tom has his hand raised, I believe, because we definitely need him right now. So we will let Tom react to that thought.
So I think I appreciate the desire to reward those master's degrees under this model. I think what complicates this for this model that we've constructed is that, so if we say that 20% of the teachers have a master's degree, so 1 in 5 teachers has a master's degree, and under this model, we're contemplating a situation where we have one teacher, let's say all 5 of those teachers exhibited the same level of effectiveness with their students. And, you know, and the current model proposes that we're thinking about that in terms of EBOS, if that's what you want to use. We also incorporate student voice into one of those choices. So getting to the comment that the kids feel like they're better teachers, that's captured in this model. So you're creating a situation where you could have 5 teachers all with the same level of effectiveness. 4 of those teachers will be paid less than one of those teachers, even though they have similar outcomes on their impact on students. And I feel like we're chasing the 20% and ignoring the 80% who are showing they're doing what we're asking, but for some reason they get less compensation under a model that's purportedly built around the impact on students. And I just want that counterfactual still exists for us, that 80% will receive less pay for doing the exact same job than 20%. And how does that play into our teachers' feelings about, you know, doing better and continuous improvement? Is that, are we, I don't know. It just feels like we're focused on the 20 and the 80 are just like, they'll be okay. They'll be fine with, I make less money because I didn't go get a master's degree. And I think this committee needs to think about that impact.
Thank you for your comments. I think it goes back to some of what have we asked teachers? I mean, what do our teachers want? You know, again, we're dealing with recruitment and retaining teachers in the profession. What is a model? What are these concepts that we're having conversation about? What do our teachers want? And I'm not sure that we've given an opportunity for that voice as we build things going forward. Because if we build something they don't want or they don't like, then we're going to struggle.
Yeah, I think to Tom's point, if you tell 80% of the teachers that they don't get the same opportunity to prove effectiveness, I don't know, it just seems, but it's hard to communicate when it's been the 20% voice has been so loud about master's pay. Again, I think it's worthy of a conversation, but that the overall master's conversation doesn't seem to fit here as opposed to fitting in that place on advanced roles.
I appreciate your comment, Dr. Griffin, and I think my response to that is I think we've heard from the vocal minority My concern is, what does the silent majority, what does the 80% think? And I don't think we're getting their feedback in the same, their voice is not being amplified in the same way that those who do have a monetary interest in this are making their voice heard. I guess that's my concern, is do we know what those 80% feel about this?
Thanks, Tom. And I was going to mention earlier, we were challenged, Tom, you came to Pink and spoke to us, and the HR leaders across the state were challenged to go back to their district to gather information from our workforce, from our teachers. I think it would be interesting for this subcommittee and the other subcommittees, if that was done, to listen to the feedback from our teachers before we design, holistically an entire model. I think that would be good listening tools for us.
So Dr. Graham and Dr. Fleming, I'm not trying to monopolize your subcommittee, but that's a great point. And I just want to let this subcommittee know that there is regional feedback sessions being created by the department. That would be Julie Pittman and Maureen Stover would be facilitating those teacher feedback sessions on the model across all 8 regions. That's scheduled for the month of May. So it is my hope that we will have that kind of information for you at your June meeting, that feedback.
Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. So colleagues, let's agree, if you will, rather than making any type of action today. I think it's a great point that we haven't heard from the silent majority. And in our last meeting, we talked very much about wanting to make certain that we hear from the voices of our teachers across the state. So before we begin to move in any particular direction, I think we do need to hear those voices and receive those voices. So if you are okay with this, let's allow these regional conversations to play out throughout the month of May, these 8 sessions, with this talking point as one of those discussion topics throughout these conversations. And then when we circle back in June, we will have responses from across the state, I hope, with input from our teachers that will give us some direction in terms of where we're going with regard to this conversation. Is everyone okay with that direction?
Can we at least say on that did we pass that last motion from Jeff about not eliminating the grandfathered pay? Because I just think if at the very baseline, we need to be clear that nobody's losing their master's pay.
Yes,
and I think we can, did we pass that already?
We did. We passed that one and the national board certification. No problem.
Okay, we did both those too. Okay, I just want to,
yes.
It's really important for people to understand that as a baseline.
Agreed. All right. So great discussion, you all. We will come back to this in June. We'll make certain that these topics are conversation pieces for those regional discussions. We'll try to get you the schedule for the regional sessions. We'll make certain that we get that out to the subcommittee members so you're aware when and where these conversations are occurring. Great conversation, you all. We will transition then away from this discussion to some extent. We have joining us this morning Alexis Schaus, who will talk to us about hold harmless provisions. So at this point, we will turn the floor over to Alexis.
Good morning, all. And this is Alexis. I am the Chief Financial Officer, and I appreciate being invited today to join this. It's been a very interesting discussion, just listening to you kind of going through all the different pieces that you have today, and I appreciate that. So related to the hold harmless provision, if I might just kind of put out there, because this could to kind of define what we're talking about. So my assumption on this is that based on the current proposed compensation model, there will be individual teachers that would see a decline in their pay if they were to go on to this model without a hold harmless. Is that my correct assumption on this? Okay, I will take silence as...
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so with that, we actually currently have a hold harmless, right? So when we went to, when teachers were removed from longevity back in 2013, I believe it was, they were teachers at the top of the scale, basically our veteran teachers. Their total compensation was, with their longevity, was higher than the scale that was put into place that, in theory, incorporated longevity money, but some of those teachers, as I said, received more than with their longevity and master's pay, etc. So the way we handle that currently, it is, I will say, difficult budgeting-wise to keep track of that, because obviously as time goes on, kind of that history is difficult to keep up with, because they're receiving the higher of what they would have received with their longevity, but we have to increase that longevity if they go up those from 15 years to 20 years, etc. So it is very challenging, both for the state and for the school districts, for that matter, to keep track of all that. But we do have a mechanism that is incorporated in both the budgeting of those individuals and when I say budgeting, I'm talking obviously at the statewide level. And to keep that in perspective, we have about 70,500 positions, just the classroom teacher positions, that we have to incorporate that budgeting, right? So when we're having position allotments, there is the state assumes the budgeting for those positions. So it is an important factor, the hold harmless. But school districts will pay those individuals on the current year's salary schedule, and that is what is certified through the department, through looking at licensure, and I'll kind of just make that very explicit as to what we do in a minute. And then the differential of any difference between that hold harmless, which is defined by the General Assembly, and that current year schedule is coded to a kind of separate hold harmless code. So that's how that is all presented at the department level. And it is seen as compensation for retirement and all those purposes. And so that funding is also included for our budgeting purpose. But to make it clear, just so that everyone understands, at the department, we in Financial and Business Services have a kind of dependent relationship with Tom Tomberlin's area being the licensure area. For every individual that is paid out in the school districts, certified, the teachers, instructional support, assistant principals, and principals, they are paid off that statewide salary schedule. And when that data comes to the department, we download that information into our systems, and we compare an individual teacher, what their pay is, against the salary schedule, and then against their license, comparing whether their years of experience, their education level, their national board certification. And so we're looking at that, but then additionally, we are looking at the areas in which the teacher is licensed. So to make sure that they are paid from the appropriate funding source. So if you have a teacher that is paid from EC funds, then we make sure they have an EC license. So all that comes to us. With regards to the hold harmless piece, We do not calculate that. That is the responsibility of the school district, and we do not certify or audit it here except for on a spot basis, because we really don't have the ability to do so. So with that, I'm happy to take questions that may be related to that process or the hold harmless with regard specifically regarding the proposed compensation model that you have here.
Colleagues, what questions might you have about the hold harmless?
So just,
I see. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead, Tom. It's okay.
Tom, I see your hand raised. I don't know if that was from a previous conversation or if there's a comment now.
I'm sorry, that was from a previous time. My apologies.
No problem. And I'm not sure who I cut off. I apologize for interrupting you. Was Dr. Holland, was that you?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And having lived through this, I think most of us on the call who have been in HR, having lived through this with when longevity went away, what DPI provided at that point in time was extremely helpful just to help us navigate the process and also communicate with our staff about what it means and when it changes, because you have to review all of those people individually currently every year. I know when we first started, when I got to Wake had nearly 500 people. It was around 100 when I left. So gradually, either the salary schedule was catching up, or those individuals were retiring, or had changed roles. But it is going to be very taxing and challenging for districts. I'm not saying that we've ever been one to shy away from hard work when it comes to that. Just know that it's going to be a challenge, and there will need to be a lot of support with how to implement this in the districts, because those of us who went through it before, like me, may not be there this time around, and those who will be doing it will have never been through this kind of work before. So it's going to be a heavy lift, but I just want to say that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Marcy. It was also at the state level with that. We did have a many-page guidance FAQ document for the school districts. And as you allude to, maybe it is a manual process, and it's not just a 1 year manual process. You have this, it will be a period of time as those teachers go through, or as Marcy said, they either leave the profession in one way or another. So it should not be underestimated, the work, for sure.
Other comments or questions? Right. Hearing none, we had some discussion questions that we wanted to present to the entire group. And Dr. Evans, thank you. Essentially 3 discussion questions for the group. What are some hold harmless best practices? What about teacher allotments? What do we need to consider and think about? So we wanted to spend a little bit of time putting these questions on the table before you with respect to hold harmless provisions. So I'll open the conversation, if you will, so that we can hear from subcommittee members around best practices relative to hold harmless provisions. Or perhaps that third question, what are some things that we need to be thinking about or considering that perhaps we haven't thought about or considered with respect to hold harmless provisions?
Hey, Dr. Graham, this is Bill Griffin. One of the things that I keep getting hit with coming from our teachers and district and leaders has to do with the teacher allotments. You know, we're currently work in a system where we're allotted teachers based on ADM. Do we foresee that staying as is moving forward, or do we look to see any type of change as we look for teacher positions and allotting those teacher positions?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to look to my DPI colleagues to see if they may be able to provide some insight to that inquiry.
Yeah, I'd certainly be happy to start with on that discussion. Currently, as I just explained, you know, our positions, which are over 70,000 positions, I mean, it comes with benefits. It's 65% of the budget of the state public school fund, so it's a huge amount. And what allows us to have those position allotments is that it is a very quantitative and independent criteria that determines a teacher's salary. And when I say independent, meaning it's time and education. So it cannot be it doesn't have a qualitative factor. For good or for bad, that's the way it is. So when those inputs are put in, it says your inputs are this, and this is how much you are paid, which makes, when you're looking at 70,000 plus employees, it is relatively stable and somewhat predictable. It takes a huge shift in the average years of experience to have a significant dollar amount on a dollar shift on that average salary. So when we're looking at this, and that's why we can have position allotments, right? It's fairly, I don't want to say it's easy to budget, but there aren't big swings or human intervention on it. It's just time and education. With the model that's being presented here, there is the EVAS indicator, right? If the teacher has made growth with her students or his students, then that is a determinant, and that is an independently calculated piece. And that would be similar to when the principals went from years of experience and the number of state paid teachers to determine their salary to an EVAS, kind of more an EVAS determined salary schedule, you know, kind of the grid that they're on now. However, we know that, you know, whatever 40% of the teachers have EVAS scores, and there are a lot in this proposal. There will be much that will be determined based on principal evaluation, student evaluation, and you know better the intricacies of what is being presented, but this is what I am gathering. And so we have maybe 2,500 principals out in the school districts, and we also need to consider our charter schools and how that would be impacted, as well as you have maybe teachers coming out of state and those kind of things, and perhaps they have been considered. But there is less of independent variables going into the determination of the salary. And so that would create a much more difficult situation to have those position allotments being that stable type position allotments, because there's no controls in place in the number of licensed for teachers you have, and it is much more graduated, much less graduated. So there could be more of an impact. So that's not to say they could not be position allotments, but I think it would need a significant amount of, it would take further investigations into that to determine if that would be something that would be able to be continued. having said that, there doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Right now with our advanced teaching roles, we have a position allotment, and then we have a dollar allotment for those advanced teaching roles that has that local flexibility as to how those additional roles an advanced teacher are utilized. And I think from my perspective, looking at what is being proposed, I think my first thought was, how much does the committee want the state to be controlling, and how much does the school districts need the kind of local control on the pay? Meaning, are all advanced teachers kind of the same? Is that, or would there be more value in recruiting, EC advanced teacher professionals and paying them a higher amount than perhaps another area of field of teaching? So that was one thing, is that this is quite prescriptive, and if that is what is best for the school districts, but it does not have the same flexibility that the school districts currently have with their funds for advanced teaching roles in that grant program. So that was one thing I wanted to kind of bring up on that. But I'll definitely stop to see if maybe I've triggered some other thoughts related to the teacher allotment. And when I'm hearing that, of course, we have another 25,000 teachers or so that are not paid out of position allotments. And then there is the impact of this compensation on local and federal budgets that perhaps need to be considered if they have not.
Thank you. Dr. Griffin, did that address your inquiry?
Yes, I appreciate your input there, Alexis, so much. There's just so many factors that we're dealing with. We wrap our minds around positions as what we know and what we've dealt with over the years. Of course, people are looking at that and saying, well, how many, if advanced teachers are making X amount of money, how many of those are we going to receive? If apprentice teachers are making $30,000 and our current teacher assistants make $21,000, how many apprentice teachers are we going to allow in said school? And doing those formulas and those ratios, it's just very difficult for me to wrap my mind around what we do now and how that'll work with this model, which lends us to a lot of conversation as to what that looks like moving forward. And I've got more questions than answers at this point, and I think some of our colleagues do as well. But thank you so much for sharing.
This is Brian. I mean, one way to approach this would be to give each district an allotment based on their ADM, which would be some set of assumptions about how many apprentices, level 1, level 2, on up through advanced roles would be associated with that amount of ADM, but then give the districts flexibility on how they actually spend the money based on their actual teacher force and their preferences, like some of the comments that Alexis was making. And so this would have a couple advantages. One, flexibility, let local districts really do what's best for them rather than having some lockstep system that the state imposes exactly. And number two, equity. It would be for districts that are on the harder to staff end, that have more level 1, level 2, level 3 teachers because they're really building their pipeline. They would essentially get more money than they would if all they got was what their actual teaching force would generate, which is the way the current system works. So there'd be both flexibility locally and equity in the sense of getting more resources to the districts that need them the most. I think if you went with a system like that, you would then have a hold harmless question for districts. You could talk about hold harmless for individual teachers. That's super important. But here we also have a question of if a district's funding really changed as a result of this, there might need to be hold harmless for districts too. Because low wealth districts would probably more than they're getting now. Some higher wealth districts might get less, and so there might need to be some hold harmless there. But I would put in a plug for this kind of flexible system, which gives local discretion and drives that equity point of making sure the lower wealth, higher need districts have more to work with.
So ultimately, we're kind of talking about a pot of money versus based on number of teachers or ADM that we have. And I think as we move forward, we really need to have a lot of conversation with finance officers from across the state, as well as superintendents and their thoughts on what that looks like.
Other reactions. Brian's flexible system makes sense to me, given my limited knowledge, but that's an option. Are there other thoughts, ideas, suggested approaches that people might want to offer, or questions that you might have in general?
Yeah. Hey, Anthony, it's Stephen. Just want to echo what Bill said. I think, again, with the new model, the concern is just you're talking to a lot of folks here that are the devil's in the details, and we're detailed folks. And I know we're not at the point with this general proposal and plan. We're many steps away from that, but it is worth consideration and thinking about how many and the allotments and things. So I appreciate that. I do believe it would be very beneficial that in the future meetings we have of this subcommittee, and maybe they wouldn't be committee members, but just advisors or consultants, if we could have some district finance officers and perhaps additional teachers in these meetings to help. Now, to have teachers, I think it's problematic to have a meeting that starts at 9 a.m. because current teachers would be in their classrooms teaching. But I think I've been out of the classroom now since 1998, so I have not been, actively teaching for a while, but to hear from our teachers, and especially as we talk about these allotments, because with Alexis on here, she can share from the state finance point of view, and that's very, very helpful. But to have district finance officers who help to implement, along with HR directors, the salaries, I think would be a critical voice we have not had thus far in these committees.
Point well taken and received. Any other feedback or comments?
Yeah, Dr. Graham, I second Stephen's recommendation that we bring some finance folks into this. And we had this discussion early on, and the fact that what some individuals who don't actually work in districts perceive to be wealth versus low wealth may be just that, a perception. I've worked in 3 different districts, and at times I would say either one of those was wealthy, but at times I would also say that they were not so wealthy. And it's the local level, they're responding to the needs of their community and their parents and programs and services, and it varies so widely across the state. And we need to have those voices that are responsible for that budget to that local board at this table.
Thank you.
And I do tend to agree with Marcy on that as well. I do think and that's why we're very fortunate to have Alexis with us. And I think the last time we brought this up, I was fine either way. The more I think about it, it may be important to have some finance folks with us. By the way, Marcy's district is much more wealthier than mine.
If I could add.
Former district.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
If I could add, we also have Chad Alderman in this committee, and he has some national perspective as well as some sort of just, if we're talking about thinking outside the box, we also should probably include them or the Edunomics Lab in that conversation.
Any other thoughts or comments relative to Hold Harmless? So Dr. Fleming and I, we're hearing very loud and clearly that we need the voices, perspective, and insight of our HR directors and our finance professionals, as well as our classroom teachers. And
I do, Dr. Graham, sorry to interrupt, but I feel like this is important. I don't know if it's in your or my purview to add those folks, or if that would be Dr. Miller that would need to do that. I will. I do think Dr. Evans, your thoughts on. Are you talking about adding them to our subcommittee or just hearing their thoughts? Let me stop there because maybe I'm.
Yeah, I think trying to create a mechanism or vehicle by which we hear, where we share, express thoughts, ideas, and then receive their expertise and their ideas about how we might address some of these issues with which we're wrestling. So trying to figure out how to design those types of opportunities, I'll say it plural, not singular, so that subcommittee members have an opportunity to engage and receive information from them would make the most sense, I think, moving forward. I wouldn't attempt to try to add them to the subcommittee at this point. We've been in existence for well over a year, and I think it would be unfair to them to bring them at the tail end of this work. But I do think we need to figure out how to engage them in conversations moving forward.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I completely agree. Sorry, I was
no problem.
Went down a different road there. Yeah, thank you.
So Dr. Fleming and I will circle up with our DPI colleagues, and we'll try to figure out the best way to have audience or audiences with our HR directors and finance professionals so that we can engage in not only this conversation relative to hold harmless, but bigger picture as well, so that we are definitely getting feedback, insight, and voice from those professionals. Otherwise, we would be, I think, offering a model that is incomplete without that level of voice and engagement. Colleagues, any other commentary relative to hold harmless, or Dr. Fleming, anything you might want to add at this point, sir?
Well, I do apologize for having to step away there, but I do, I think it was a fruitful conversation that kind of gives us a see where everyone's thoughts are at the moment. So I don't know that I have any more to add to that, but as I make notes, I know that we still have a long ways to go for the work of our subcommittee. And now we have a little extra one. And that's okay.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming, and Ms. Schaus, thank you so very much for engaging us this morning in conversation relative to hold harmless. I learned a great deal being a university type from ed prep program, so I'm learning a great deal in this space. So thank you very much for taking time to engage us and share with us. So colleagues, we are, according to my agenda, at the end of our conversation. Just kind of a quick recap based on everything that I've heard. Just a reminder with respect to timeline, our next meetings will be June and July. And then we're expected in August to present a draft proposal, if you will, for conversational purpose, for discussion purpose to Pepsi, with then a formal proposal in September. So that's the expectation. But we did hear from Dr. Evans that we may be able to adjust that slightly if we see that there's a need to do so. But we'll need to communicate that to the Pepsi chair as quickly as we can if we need to make an adjustment. The other thing that has emerged, our action items that we took today, this subcommittee did agree to make it an explicit recommendation within our model that national board compensation and those individuals who are currently compensated for master's pay, pretty much the status quo provision, if you will. We want to make certain that we explicitly state that we are supportive of that status quo approach and that we're not moving away from it. And then future conversations around master's pay and how it connects with the advanced teacher role and so things of that nature. We're going to hold that for the June meeting. The Our understanding is that in the month of May, there will be these regional conversations, and I heard the number 8, so that there will be 8 regional conversations that take place, and we want to make certain that we have a couple of questions embedded within those regional conversations relative to master's pay, advanced teacher's role, and things of that nature. So it's our understanding that when we come back in June for our next meeting, we can review the findings of those discussions across the state of North Carolina, and hopefully we'll hear from what we're calling the silent majority, and we'll have some input and information on which to base our decisions and our thoughts relative to our model moving forward. And then finally, we've agreed here moments ago that we want to include our HR professionals and our finance professionals in conversations so that we are hearing from them and factoring into our thinking about our model, their voice. So those are the pieces that I have in front of me that I've taken notes throughout the conversation. Dr. Fleming, anything that you have that I may have overlooked or may have ignored?
No, Dr. Graham, like I said earlier, we do have a lot of work ahead of us, and I appreciate your work and appreciate everything today. Stephen Martin did put something in the chat about looking at compensation models in other states that were in the process of implementing or had implementing an advanced teacher role compensation model, and could this be shared in the future? Certainly that makes sense. I don't know if that's something that, again, Dr. Tomberlin or Brenda Berg or Brian Hassler or somebody could go over, but or if they have any information to share, that would be good too.
Great. We'll try to figure out how to best address that and bring that information to collective.
And Marcy also put, we need to consider impact to the IFE conversion salaries for districts, the international faculty. What a lot of us, participate in some of those that are out there as well. That definitely is needed for the districts that use that. We're one of them. So,
Dr. Fleming, this is Tom. I think that is a concern, but I think also a concern that's been articulated kind of from the beginning is how does this model handle out-of-state educators? How does it,
yes. Mm-hmm.
I think that could be, those could be similar provisions that we create for anybody coming external to the system. But yeah, that definitely needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. That's a third of our pipeline.
Absolutely. We'll add those.
Tom, this is Wendy. At what point do we talk about what this looks like for licensure? I know we talked a little bit about this at PAIC, and one of our big concerns is before, as people move from perhaps a permit to teach to emergency to residency to initial to continuing, pay does not change. But with every one of these moves, pay is going to change. So the timeliness of the license updates would be really important. So I just didn't know at what point in this process do we start talking about what this looks like for licensure, what forms look like, what processes look like, so that when it's implemented, we're ready to hit the ground running and it's as smooth and seamless as it can be.
Yeah, I've expressed to a lot of folks over the past couple meetings that this is the policy arena, and it really is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to implementation. This has a huge implementation runway, or it's going to have. And the only thing I could really point to in that in that vein is as you know, all know, we're in the process of doing an RFP for a new licensure system, and that kind of flexibility to support something that we haven't even developed yet was a critical component of that. So we've been thinking about this kind of from the beginning, how the level of complexity this is going to add, and most of us can't envision that with our current process. So that is currently being worked on, Wendy, in terms of how do we have to have systems that will support this kind of complexity in the future. But yeah, I mean, I would estimate this is, well, I'm not going to estimate anything. I'm going to say this model would have a considerable implementation plan in order to be able to be successful. I don't know how long that looks that is, but I anticipate it to be pretty big.
Thank you, Dr. Tomlin and Wendy. Thank you so much. Any other final thoughts, comments, or things that we may have overlooked? And Marcia, we did grab the out-of-state educators cultural exchange, added that to the list. All right. Well, we have a great deal of work ahead of us, but I thank you all for your engagement. We thank you for your engagement. We thank you for your conversation this morning. We thank you for your questions. The more questions you raise, then the better off we will be long term. So thank you so very much for that level of engagement and that level of inquisitiveness, if you will, so that we're thinking about what we need to do moving forward. Well, I usually say if all hearts and minds are at peace, but that may not be the case this morning. So what I'll simply say is hopefully you all are feeling good, and we will share information with you moving forward, particularly on those regional conversations, so that we can pay attention to what's happening in those conversations across the state. So when we come back in June, we can have some more robust conversation about what we've learned. So thank you so very much. Dr. Fleming, anything you'd like to add, sir, before we transition to adjournment?
No, I thank everybody for all of their comments, and I want to wish all of you a happy Teacher Appreciation Week, because I believe in one way or another we're either all educators, still educators, we're educators, whatever it may be. So this is your week, and again, thanks for the wonderful conversation this morning, and I've probably written more down today than I have in any one meeting. So thank you so much, and thank you, Dr. Graham.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. At this moment in time, we will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we adjourn this meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed, please say nay. Meeting adjourned. You all have a great day. Take care.
Thank you.